Good morning and good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us for this webinar today dedicated to the second open call of the NGI Atlantic initiative. We hope that we are all good and healthy in this period. Today we are going to present you to give you a short presentation about the project in general, and then we'll go a deep dive into the details of the second open call, including the topics that are addressed and the details of the application and the deadlines and all the specifications about the second call. I won't take you any longer, so I'll leave the floor to Jim Clark, who is the coordinator of the NGIatlantic.eu project from the Waterford Institute of Technology. I am Sarah Pittonet from Trust IT, and together with Waterford and Euroscom, we are the partners leading the initiative from the European side. Thank you again for joining. Please don't hesitate to ask for any questions using the chat box, or to keep them for the end of the meeting for the question and answer time. Jim, the floor to you.
Thank you very much, Sarah, and welcome to everyone to our webinar on the second open call. So I would like to briefly introduce the project NGIatlantic.eu itself. It's a research and innovation action project under the Next Generation Internet Initiative, which has been running since the autumn of 2016. And our specific objective is to bridge the EU US research and innovation activities between the projects and the good work going on in both EU and US by researchers and innovators in topics related to next generation internet, and specifically running experiments. So we're funding EU teams to collaborate with US research teams in running experiments. I'll go into a bit more detail now about the key features of the project. So we're running 5 open calls for third-party projects. We've had our first open call, and now we're in the middle of our second open call. And the overall funding that we have for our 5 open calls is 2.8 million euros. And we'll be funding the NGI experiments, transatlantic experience with these fundings. We also have an external advisory group of experts on both sides of the Atlantic, coming from different areas, academia, policy, technology, etc. That's advising us on the priorities that we should be funding. And last but not least, we have a very good external pool of evaluators who are completely independent of the project that do the evaluation work for us. And then we also have a twinning lab, which I'll discuss in a moment. Before I do, I'd like to mention as well that we have coaching and mentoring for both the applicants and also the projects which are funded. So we have the facility to help both the applicants putting in proposals and then also those that that have success. So the Twinning Lab is a space that we have to assist the researchers and innovators on both sides to discover and connect with potential partners for putting in applications. So and we're happy to say that in quite a large number of our consortia or the teams that were formed, some of them, a good number of them actually came together via the use of the Twinning Lab. So that has been quite successful, and the membership is growing as well. So we please ask you to join the Twinning Lab, and it'll help you to find some partners, and you can showcase your activities there as well. Now, I'd like to jump now into the actual, into the second open call details. And the one outstanding feature about the second open call is there's actually two themes, or two streams, I should say, in this open call. And I'll get into them right now. So the first stream, due to there was somewhat of an uncertainty in the first open call about the funding aspects on the US side. So we were a little bit more flexible than what was possibly in the call text on the types of experimental platforms, infrastructures that could be used in the applications. And since the first open call, there has been some very interesting activities, which we're going to present a little bit later in the webinar, which are looking more at globalization or internationalization of the US NSF-funded platforms. So we felt it was a very good time now to have a dedicated stream in our second open call, which is dealing directly with allowing the experimental platforms on both sides of the Atlantic to join together in a dedicated project. So not so much running applications, but just interconnecting and joining together, enabling having a EU US platform which would enable experimentations in the various areas. And of course, they could be wired, wireless, cloud-based, hybrid, experimental platforms. And they would be relevant platforms to 5G or beyond, IoT, big data, AI, machine learning, all the next generation internet type things, secure, resilient, and so on. And also cutting across the NGI priority topics, which are privacy, trust, and basic technologies, decentralized data governance, discovery and identification technologies, strengthening internet trustworthiness with electronic identities, service and data portabilities, and the internet architecture renovation. And so the expectation would be that they wouldn't just join or interconnect for one-off, that they would remain available throughout the life of our project and beyond for future experiments, and they could be used within future projects that are being pitched to the open calls. And what would they get out of that? We would list them on the NGIatlantic.eu website and promote them as a suitable transatlantic platform for experimentation and implementation to be funded in the subsequent NGIatlantic.eu open calls. So they would be basically the key players or actors that upcoming projects could go to, and they could be invited into future projects within future open calls, or even in this open call as well, which I'll get into in a moment. And so the other thing as to what they would get out of it, that if they're invited into future projects, they could also receive the funding for the support and maintenance required, depending, of course, on the specific conditions of the calls and the requirements of the proposal. Then the second stream is quite similar to the first open call, and the reason for this is, as we did in the first open call, we were stressing the areas in NGI that had results already coming out. So when NGI projects started in 2018, 2019, funding open calls, the first three topics were privacy and trust enhancing technologies, decentralized data governance, and discovery and identification technologies. So as a result of their good work in funding open call projects, the results of those projects are now available for experimentation of their results. The other three that I mentioned previously, the the internet renovation, architecture, and so on. They started around the same time as ours, so they will be topics of priority in the next open call or the following open calls once their results are available for experimentation. So, again, these are the three main priority topics for the second stream. So it's quite similar to the first open call in that we covered these topics as well. And these, as we said in the first open call, even though these map directly onto the previous NGI projects, which have funded open call projects, it's open to all. So, innovators that have not been involved in previous projects, that's absolutely okay. You're still welcome to participate with us. It's not a closed club. So please feel free to put in an application to either of these streams. So the duration of this open call started on the 1st of August and finishing the 30th of September. And the evaluation notification will take place in October 2020. The indicative expected start dates of the project are 1st of January 2021. Of course, taking into account the COVID-19 situation. And there are two types of proposals that can be funded. There's the long-term contribution LT projects, which are a maximum 6-month duration with a monitoring frequency monthly. And the funding range is 50,000 to 150,000. Then there's also the short-term contribution projects, the ST projects, maximum contract duration 3 months and monitoring frequency of fortnightly, and funding range of 25,000, to 75,000. And the eligible costs are just personnel costs plus travel and subsistence, and then a 25% overhead on both of those, flat rate 25%, just like in H2020. And we've some guidance here in the projects for Stream 1. Because the experimental platforms are already mature and it's a matter of them interconnecting, to be available for future projects, we're giving some guidance that they're dealing, primarily with just interconnection. Then there'd be an expectation that these projects would probably best fit in the short-term projects category. However, as they always say in H2020, this guidance does not preclude other project types and amounts being requested if they're explained and justified. So if you need more, then you just explain it and justify it. And also, we are open to having a sort of a teamed up approach. So if you have a project interconnecting two experimental platforms that would be going into Stream 1, let's say, and you know about another project that needs an experimental platform that would normally be going into Stream 2, feel free to join together, and you can pitch this project together, because we feel that this would actually strengthen the application scope and idea. So we do allow, and in that case, obviously, it would more than likely be an LT longer-term project if it were one that was both streams coming together. So I mentioned earlier that there's some very interesting developments in the US in the NGI space, which is looking specifically at sort of globalization or internationalization, or going across borders and things like that. And this is sort of ever since the ICE-T program, which was the US EU program from 2018 2019. It's good to see that this sort of language is being used now, and we could possibly leverage some of this. And Yvonne Seskar from Rutgers will talk a little bit more about this, but just I wanted to highlight two examples. There's the International Research and Education Network Connections program, IRNC, which the NSF has just announced the results recently on. And then there's also an interesting supplemental fund where US academics or active NSF-funded wireless researchers can apply for supplemental funds to the Advanced Wireless Research Program, Cosmos, Powder Renew, and also AirPod. And while they're not specifically designated for international connections, there could be some scope, evidently to utilize this fund if there is a need for them to do some international connections with Europe. And again, there's the link. And we're compiling links into our twinning lab coming from these results. At the moment, we're going through the list of results, and we're making contact with the partners in the different projects, like the Fabric project in the US. They've been awarded a project called Fabric Across Borders, which is specifically in relation to interconnecting outside of the US. So this, there's good potential that there could be some way to leverage these funds for our open calls. So with that, I would like to turn over to Ivan Seskar from Rutgers University, who's a partner in the project, is NGIatlantic.eu partner as well, and he will present his perspective on this EU US collaboration. Thanks, Ivan.
Thank you, Jim.
Thanks, Jim. So let me see if I can share my screen.
Yeah. While you fix this, Ivan, maybe in the meantime, we received some questions already from some of the participants, which might be of interest for everybody. We had one question about.
Sarah, can you just, it won't let me share the screen. You cannot, it says you cannot start sharing while the other participant is sharing.
So I think, Jim, yeah, you need to stop sharing. Yeah. Great. So there was one question asking about the eligibility of UK-based companies, and the answer is yes. So UK companies can apply, since according to recent guidelines, UK-based company can continue to be eligible under Horizon 2020 program.
And that goes all the way past December 31st. It goes the whole duration of NGIatlantic.eu.
Thanks,
so
Jim.
It doesn't cut off. It continues as long as we are an H2020 project. Our open calls are open and available to UK organizations right until the very end of our project in 2021.
Yeah, and of course, consortia can be built by different institutes in Europe and UK collaborating with US as partners. Then there was a question about one participant who was selected by another NGI program. And I suggest that we keep this question for a second part, since we're going to address some of this in the lessons learned part of the webinar.
Yes, that's good.
So, Ivan.
Sure. Okay, so Jim actually touched on a number of things already, so I'll just try to rush a little bit through these in interest of time. So the first thing I want to talk about is the PAR program, and PAR stands for Platform for Advanced Wireless Research, right? And this is actually the National Science Foundation attempt to do a sort of collaborative project between the industry and the academia, right? In this case, National Science Foundation. And the total budget for the PAR program is on the order of $100 million, with the idea that if you combine the industrial consortium with both with cash and in-kind contributions and the funding from National Science Foundation, the overall program reach and success would be significantly higher than if either of the two would put the money together on their own, right, into the program. So right now, the overall idea is to create 3 to 4, and we are already funding 3 platforms, and the 4th one is coming up, of so-called city-scale wireless experimental facilities, right? And when we say city-scale, we are talking about scale on the order of 30 to 50,000 people. And so in the first round, 2 platforms were announced, the Power and the Cosmos. And then in the 3rd round, the AirPaw was the next platform to be announced. And right now, the whole community is in the process of deciding on the 4th platform. And I'll just announce what the subject of that 4th platform will be, whereas we still don't know who the winners are. So the Powder platform. So this is the deployment in the Salt Lake, in the Utah, in Salt Lake City. And the idea is really to sort of create a fully programmable platform for sub-6 gigahertz wireless experimentation. It sort of covers, as you can see in the map at the bottom of the screen, covers the area between University of Utah, which is on the right-hand side, suburban area between the University of Utah and downtown, and the downtown, which is all the way on the left. And the idea is to deploy a fairly significant number of fully programmable software-defined radios in the infrastructure mode, as well as a number of devices that are going to be deployed on the buses. And of course, create a fairly sophisticated software framework on top of which the experimenters can do all sorts of wireless experiments. Now, one of the main interesting things about both Powder and Cosmos, which are the 2 platforms announced in the first round, and of course now the 3rd one as well, is the fact that the FCC designated these as experimentation zones, which means that the rules for spectrum usage are much less stringent than in the rest of the US. I mean, there are a lot of constraints, but there are a lot of interesting benefits to doing that. Another main focus of the Powder platform is also massive MIMO, and there are some really interesting programmable massive MIMO base stations which were developed by the Rice University, and that's the so-called Renew part of the platform. The second one I want to talk about is the one that I'm in charge of, which is called the Cosmos. And that is deployment in New York City. We are talking about the area in West Harlem, which is between 120th and 135th Street in New York City. Of course, fairly interesting and highly dense, urban, I mean, probably the most difficult environment in the world to deploy wireless systems in. And the idea is to sort of focus on high bandwidth, low latency, high computing requirements type of experimentation. Similarly to Utah deployment, we are also talking about sub-6 gigahertz, but much more focus is on optical technologies and the millimeter wave in order to achieve higher speeds and higher densities of deployment. Now, the idea is to deploy these, again, fully programmable on all levels, including radio as well as optical layer. Devices, and we have 3 types of devices, what we call the large and medium and small, and think of it as large is a rooftop deployment, medium is a street lamppost deployment, and small is something that you can, I don't want to call it portable, but near portable. You need probably 2 hands to carry it given the state of technology. Fully programmable devices that are interconnected with a massive fiber footprint, which is, again, as I mentioned, fully programmable. And it has some sophisticated millimeter wave radios and stuff. And both of these deployments, of course, suffered during the COVID. So even though we were supposed to finish phase 1 deployment, by now, obviously, we are a little bit behind. The 3rd player in the game is the AirPaw, which is really focusing on unmanned aerial systems and its deployment in North Carolina. Of course, they have a programmable wireless component as part of it, but the focus is on flying drones, and in addition to being innovation zone, FCC innovation zone, they also have a fairly close coordination with FAA, which allows them to, and have drone operators, which of course will be put in place to enable experimentation with highly mobile platforms. So these are the three that were already announced and readily available for experimentation. Actually, first two are available. The third one is still in the process of early deployment. The fourth one will be focused on the rural or connecting the unconnected type of deployment, and basically it's now in the final phase of decision. I believe that's narrowed down to 2 recipients, potential recipients, so we'll see what comes next, and I believe the decision is expected within the next month or 2. The next project I want to very briefly talk about is so-called Fabric, which is this sort of fairly large and significant project designed to create a really dedicated network. And for those of you who heard about Genie before, Genie was based on sharing long links, fiber links between the deployment sites, whereas Fabric is getting a dedicated and guaranteed bandwidth between the site deployments. And the idea is really to create this super core or high bandwidth network across the US. And in each of the sites, deploy a fairly sophisticated rack of machines and programmable switches. And of course, create an experimentation platform that can span the continent. And as the ambition of the Fabric is to sort of push the networking research further, it's also interconnecting all these previously announced power programs. So you can see that actually both Powder and the Cosmos are nodes on this network. And again, it's networking research, so of course, this network is now being fully deployed. I believe the first number of sites will be coming up early next year. But this is definitely a program that's related to what our second call is all about. Jim mentioned these are the 2 programs that are potential funding sources for the US partners. The first one on the left is really the related to power program. So anybody who participates in the power or wants to, of course, this applies to both participants in power as well as people who have existing NSF grants, can ask for additional funding for running experiments on any of the power platforms, right? And this is, if you have a US counterpart who already has an existing NSF program, chances are they can get funded through this program, right? The one on the right is actually way more interesting for this particular call, open call, and that is the IRNC, and Jim touched on it. But the idea is this is the collaborative networking type of program that was announced, I believe, early in the year, and the awards were given already. So these are potentially some of the interesting programs that were funded under the IRNC. As you can see, and by the way, the link at the very bottom will allow you to see all of them. And there is a fairly large list of about, I want to say, 28 awardees who got funding and are now potentially a partner for anybody in the EU side who wants to work jointly with the US academic partner. And so the ones I listed here were just a very quick browse of the things that look relevant. And as you can see, for instance, and I can talk more about it if you had any time, is the COSMIC, which is actually the attempt to connect Cosmos testbed with a number of counterparts, both in Europe, Japan, and Brazil. And so, of course, we got funding and can now start doing connectivity between the sites as well as joint experimentation. And this is where I would stop. This is my last slide. So, and of course, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ivan. Just one quick question. I know it may not be directly in your area, but there has been a couple of applicants inquiring about the future cloud platforms part of the NSF program. Do you know whether they have anything similar to these sort of supplemental funds or this globalization type activities?
I'm actually not sure if they have international ones, but I know for sure that they have the quite a lot of rolling funding opportunities for cloud-based research, and especially nowadays AI/ML type of research. I'm not sure if there is an international component to that. But there is a discussion about next round of IST funding, which is really focused on international type of collaboration. Right.
Okay. All right, thank you. And then just one last thing I'd like to point out, the one near the bottom, the Fabric Across Borders. We've been in contact with Fabric today, in fact, and they were explaining, when you go to this website, you will see, I think, 10 or more with the same title, but with different investigators. So it'll say Fabric Across Borders, then 2 lines down, it'll say Fabric Across Borders again, but with different people. So they explained to me today that they are actually all part of one big Fabric Across Borders project, but they're split into different ones looking at different topics.
Yeah, so I would actually point out that is almost identical to open call type of thing, right? Where there was this larger, NGIatlantic open call, that is this particular one. In other words, there was a sort of a pile of money that was lumped into a single project by title, but actually involves a number of individual co-PIs or PIs, right, who are doing subject research on various aspects, and they would be perfect partners for, if of course the topic aligns, for the collaboration.
Okay, so we're in the process of collecting the contact information and getting them signed up in the Twinning Lab, so that will help people on the EU side to get connected with them.
And Anita is the, as you saw in the email, Anita is the person to talk to.
Okay, thank you.
Ivan, we have a question that you might help with. One of the participants is asking where we can find the details regarding the test beds, practical things such as do you provide public IP, or question regarding the lower layer SDN access.
Sure. So I believe all 3 platforms now have active websites. So, and I believe on the NGIatlantic, we have links to Power platforms. So, Power website would be a perfect place to sort of get springboard access to individual testbed websites. And so Fabric, Powder, AirPaw, and Cosmos all have fairly active websites with a lot of details about how to use the platform. And then, of course, talking about individual project, in each of these is supposed to have, at least that's according to NSF rules, to have their own website that is available for public to see. But, maybe these IRNC sites are a little bit not yet ready, because the award actually starts October 1st in the next fiscal year.
Thanks. And another question about the starting time of the projects. Again, we are presenting this later on. But yeah, in general, we foresee projects starting in January next year for the second open call. Thank you, Ivan. So I would now give the floor to.
Yes, thank you, Sarah and Jim. I try to share my screen. So that should be okay. Start the video. So good afternoon and good morning, everyone. I will talk in the next few minutes about Fed for Fire, which is a collection, well, a federation of testbeds at the EU side. And I will maybe show what it is about. So what we did is there were already existing a number of testbeds over Europe. So you see here, it's throughout Europe. It's different technologies. So going from wire testbeds, wireless, Internet of Things, and through clouds, big data kind of things, GPUs. So you have different testbeds, different organizations offering those testbeds, and we tried to make it easier to access them by making a federation of it so that you can, with a single login, use all of those testbeds. So we started with this work in 2012, and we are now in the second EU project doing this till the end of next year at least. So it's really about multiple technologies, big testbeds as well, going from wireless to GPU kind of things. So we have all this documented on the website of Fed for Fire. So for instance, to have an easy entrance that you can see what is available, what testbed does offer what, that's a starting point there. So as I said, the goals of the federation were to make it possible with single account, single tool to access all of those, to make it really simple, so you can use them to scale up, to use specific resources, etc. And of course, all of them are remotely usable, which is certainly in this specific time very interesting, because people can just work on with their experimentation. We also went beyond. So actually, with the same account, you can now access over 65 testbeds, also US testbeds, for instance, Genie testbeds, Cloud Lab, because we also federated with them. So our accounts are also usable over there. And we have a continuous monitoring system so that you know which testbeds are up and running. This is some screenshots of the user tool JFET. So each box on the screen is actually a node that you can reserve. You can interconnect them, and you can build quite complex topologies for your experimentation. Combining, of course, different testbeds is possible there. It is possible to use them in an open access method. So that means that it is actually free for research purposes. Of course, some of the testbeds limit resources for that open access or only give best effort support. So most of them also offer a package where you can have better support or maybe even consulting services when you pay them. But in general, they are all open access available. This is an example of an experiment we did a couple of years ago, where we combined already EU and US testbeds. So what we wanted to do is to have several cloud providers providing video, and then we had customers in other locations. So you see, we combined or interconnected a software-defined exchange at our site in Belgium at IMEC, together with the Washington exchange called WIX. And then we have their Cloud Lab interconnected. We had Amazon Internet too. And what we did was actually, we had 3 cloud sites, so the red clouds where video was served. And then we had caches in the software-defined exchanges and customers, or well, emulated customers at the other sites. And in that way, we could actually scale up to a large number of resources over different parts of the world to do our experiment. So that was how it was built. We built a small backbone with the different sites, and then actually scaled up the number of resources for customers. And then we did some measurements, and you see here actually kind of ring where we could break one of the paths and then traffic went the other way. And that was the kind of experimentation that could be done. So the information on this Fed for Fire is available on, of course, www.fedforfire.eu, which gives a global overview. And then you have more technical documentation at doc.fedforfire.eu. And for any contact, you can contact me on my email address, or also contact at fedforfire.eu for the general email. So that's in a couple of minutes an overview of Fed for Fire. Thanks.
Thank you, Brett. Okay, so we can move back to our presentations now on some lessons learned and frequently asked questions about this call. In the meantime, we have a couple of more questions. So one relates to results from the first call applications. So specific questions about PM and resources. So I'm not sure whether we should take this privately, but so the question says how much user testing should be included or not included. So this information can be relevant for all the other applicants. It's a very precise one, leveraging on the feedback of the first open call.
Yes. Well, in the frequently asked questions, we covered this a bit. What originally in the program, in the call text for the original, let's say ICT 31 2020, 2019, 2020, it was specifically just for experimentation, of results, of NGI results. So when we were putting together our program, we had quite a number of research innovators coming and asking whether some person months could be put in, for research and innovation. And we thought about it, we discussed it with the European Commission, and we then decided that we would allow some balanced, we called it, amount of research and innovation, if it was explained in the proposal. But we were very strict on the actual dissemination part, because we said in our frequently asked questions that dissemination is mainly covered as part of the the NGI initiative dissemination, and it really is not, should not be part of funded. It would be kind of a double funding situation, within the experiments projects. So we did allow some flexibility in terms of, some research and innovation, although we sort of insist upon having, a midterm experiment and, a final experiment. And then if you want to have a little bit of research and innovation to do some, some updates or something in between, we said, okay, we'll be flexible. Please explain that in your proposals, in your applications. And that, should be okay. But if it's a situation where you have, more than half is devoted to, something like, research and innovation and dissemination, then that would not be, what was originally envisaged in the call.
Yeah, the suggestion here is really to try and stick to the 4 criteria and read them carefully, since these are those that the evaluators will take into consideration when performing the evaluations. Then we have another question, maybe Ivan can help. Which US facilities fit well for cloud-based services and experiments?
Well, maybe I can quickly start. The future cloud platform of the NSF has at least 2 projects that I know of. There's the Chameleon project, which was just granted a 4-year extension, I think 2 months ago. And there's another project called Cloud Lab. Now, potentially there's another one Yvonne might know. So they would probably be the closest fit. And recently I've been asking about, I've been asking for trying to get information about this to see whether they have similar types of calls like the IRNC, which we just presented earlier, for the future cloud platform program, because that would fit quite well. Yvonne, is there anything else you might want to add?
I know those are pretty much the two that are most visible, and of course both are somewhat related to networking. I mean, there is still the Genie going on, but that I would argue is a little bit old and on the sort of shutdown phase. Not shutdown, but it's not. There is no future funding for Genie. So Fabric has a non-trivial computing capabilities, but it's not, strictly speaking, a cloud-based facility.
And Brett, from your side, do you have any contacts with your Washington exchange or the Cloud Lab? I think you mentioned was part of your international connection. Yeah,
so it's we have some good contacts with indeed Cloud Lab, also InstaGenie, MLab, and also the ExoGenie people, which are now the same as in Fabric. So I think that's the way they keep their resources up and running, which are all cloud resources as well. Yeah.
Okay, so perhaps George, if you make contact with Brett about that. Okay, do you want me to continue, Sarah?
Yes, Jim, please go on.
Okay. All right, so for this part, we thought we would just cover some of the things that we're doing a little differently based upon the lessons learned from our first open call. So as I already presented, we decided to do a multi-theme approach to attract the EU US experimental platforms to interconnect for the future projects. And again, this is because we didn't have as many of the traditional experimental platforms involvement based upon decisions that we made due to some uncertainty about the funding in the US. So that was the right decision at the time, but now that we see that there's some interesting possibilities happening on globalization, we're trying to jump on that and have kind of a double approach. Okay. Then in terms of our new platform requirements, I have it in bold here because it's quite important. Similar to the H2020 requirements, we have a description of honor required, and basically the main thing here is just that it certifies for us that the EU partners have the resources and the capabilities to carry out what they're applying for, and also that they're aware of the project. So in the case of the US partners, this is quite important because we want to make sure that that number one, that they're aware of the program and of the EU US implementation agreement, which is what defines how the funding is structured. And so that has to be submitted with the application, just to ensure that we don't have any any questions about whether they have a full EU-US team on board. Then also, the NGI initiative has a very strict policy on the projects that are funding the open calls to coordinate together. And there's nothing wrong with applying to a number of different NGI open calls, but as the coordinators of these projects, we must coordinate those activities. And in order to make that easier, it was suggested that we compile or we collect these details right up front in the application process. And they're also interested as well to see if the participants are involved in H2020 applications, because one of the KPIs, I suppose, they have is that they want to see how many new applicants they're getting, or the sort of non-usual suspects, as they call them. How many innovators that they're getting that normally wouldn't apply to EU H2020 versus how many are the ones that would apply to EU H2020. So don't misunderstand the reason this is being asked for. It's not being asked to downgrade or be a negative thing. It's just a statistical piece of information, and all of the RIAs are going to be asking this now so that we can better coordinate our activities once the projects or the applications are submitted. Okay. And then we also added additional fields. There was some very good feedback from our applicants from the first call. So you can now include resources for multi-EU team applications. Just on the size of the teams, I just want to mention that we used the word consortium before. We actually shouldn't have, because in the NGI initiative, they really don't expect mid-size or large consortia, and they tend to use the word team instead. So really one EU member or maybe 2 EU members, or if you need more than that, just explain it. It has to be very well explained as to why you need so many members. So just keep that in mind. Then during the first open call, possibly because of, ironically, because of the COVID-19 situation where most people were in lockdown, we had very many coaching calls, one-to-one calls with people. And for the most part, the feedback has been good. And, and we think that it really did improve and helped in the application process. So obviously, we're going to continue this. And if you want to have one-to-one calls, what we generally do is you make we send an email to the email on the platform, and then we can organize a one-on-one call with you to discuss what your particular challenges are, or how we can help you. Okay, and just some lessons learned from the review process itself. Please provide a precise, coherent, and realistic budget breakdown. And as I mentioned before, the funding is for the effort, travel, and a fixed 25% overhead. And a number of the proposals or applications included other inadmissible costs, and they cannot be included. Then please provide precise information about the US experimental platforms. Have links and things like that. And this will benefit the evaluators. Some of the evaluators said that in some cases there were no links whatsoever, and they had to do their own searching, which sometimes even led to a dead end. So that obviously won't reflect very well on your application. Then in some cases, the background and the NGI related fields and work related topics could have been enhanced. And we really ask you to do that, and not just even if you were not involved in another NGI related project, that's absolutely fine, as I said before. But just elaborate a bit on your related activities, even in other programs. More clear and quantified KPIs are needed, and then please give a good description of the impacts of the experiments, and how these can be sustained after your project itself. That's very important. Then, as Sarah mentioned before, just make sure you observe the 4 criteria points. And, we have quite an extensive FAQ section now. Whenever we have these coaching calls, we actually translate that into, new FAQs on a regular basis. So that other applicants can learn from. Of course, we anonymize everything, but potentially learn from the challenges from others as well. Okay.
Thank you, Jim. Yeah, before going to the FAQ, which are also available on the website, by the way, we have a couple of questions, new ones from one participant asking about the Twinning Lab. So if we submit the Twinning Lab form with an overview of our idea, we will get feedback on the adequacy and about the DNA consortium. So we advise, of course, we suggest you sign up to the Twinning Lab, because this will also allow you to get more visibility, and we will help sharing your entity and the idea you have. We advise you, as Jim said, to ask for support to the coaching team for specific questions about the project idea itself. So the answer is sign up, and then we will move forward with you.
Yes, I would just add to that. When you sign up, please contact us right away and tell us that you would like some help on that, and we will have a call about it. And just on the other question, if you don't have an experimental platform identified, but a partner do we need? So the answer would be probably yes. And it is the applicant's responsibility to find the partners. However, you could possibly find them through the Twinning Lab, because, as I mentioned before, there's now these these activities in the US which are going on much more so than the first call. And so we're in the process of contacting each and every one of those and getting them to sign up to the Twinning Lab. And we can also, while we're doing so, if we see someone that might fit you quite well, we can certainly tell you about them, or you can do it yourself. Or both, some combination of both, and then hopefully we'll find someone.
Thanks.
Okay, there's another question. The experiments very academic. We are applying researchers and practitioners testing to develop a product. Yes, it's still it is available to researchers and innovators and practitioners. Absolutely. If you have a product that you want to experiment with, this is the with the U.S. partner. This is the call for you. Absolutely. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so we probably don't have a lot of time, Sarah, but I just wanted to touch on that one. There was one question there about can you apply to more than one?
Yeah.
So let me just go to that one.
I hope we managed to reply to all the questions in the chat. But yeah, there was one asking about submitting more than one application, and what happens if the proposals are both, let's say, eligible and approved.
Yes. Yeah. So basically, I mean, as in H2020, this is allowed. Now, so it's probably not that usual that it happens, but it is allowed that you could have two proposals going into the same open call. They will be evaluated by individual external evaluators independently, for sure. But I just wanted to point out that the NGI initiative is monitoring, I mentioned it earlier, the situation in terms of double funding and operational capacity. So, in this case, where, if both are funded, let's say, and they're both in the NGIatlantic.eu, the same monitoring of the situation will take place, as an applicant who maybe has one in two different NGI projects. So we basically work together with the other NGI RIAs, when we identify that, the same applicants are in different projects. So basically we look at two things. Is there any potential for double funding? And is there any operational capacity issues? And we have a way of going through that with, and we've done this already in our first open call. So it's a very structured process, and it's quite a thorough process as well, where we look at both of these double funding issues. Okay, and as I mentioned before, this is one of the reasons why we we now have this this declaration of honor as well, because it does cover these sort of issues ahead of time. Okay. Now the other thing that I wanted to say as well, that if you're thinking about putting something into, let's say, another NGI initiative, like let's say the NGI Zero PET project, and you might also be thinking about putting something into our project, you can contact us and we can discuss with you about where the best fit would be. So as I mentioned before, if you still have a lot of research and innovation that you have to do before you can do the experiments with a US partner, we always would advise you to go to the other NGI RIAs that would hopefully have an open call available to you. Okay, so if you come to us and you still have to do a lot of research and innovation to get it to a stage that you have to do an experiment with the US partner, our open call may not be the one that's perfect for you, but we can advise you through that, through our coaching activities. Okay.
Thank you. So we are coming to the end of this webinar. Yeah, as said, so the recordings and the slides will be available on the website, on the NGI Atlantic website, in the webinars page and in the second open call page. So please refer to them in case of need. I might conclude by saying that we've just announced today the results of the first open call. So you will find some more details about the funded projects again online. Let me paste here in the chat the link to the direct news. And we invite you to sign up to our newsletters in case you haven't yet, since we are going to organize a second webinar before the end of September, in order to provide you with some additional support before the deadline of this second call, and in general to stay tuned with all our updates. We have a support office, so feel free to write at contact@NGIatlantic.eu for any need or any questions relating to practical issues or coaching support. With that, I thank you, and I thank our speakers, so Ivan and Brecht, for joining us today, and we wish you all the best of luck for your applications.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.